Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat with the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting. Well, today it's a battle royal. We're pitting the boomers versus Gen X, Y, F, Alpha, Q, whatever. We're going to talk about how shooting has changed from the time we were wet behind the ears young pups to how folks kind of approach it today. And it's interesting. We're going to highlight the differences, we're going to highlight the similarities, and we're going to challenge you a little bit. So we'll do that in just a second. First, of course, I always have to remind you, please like and subscribe the podcast. That's the best way you can support what we're doing and keep this free content coming your way. And also, don't forget our great sponsor, Armasight. Step up your game with Armasight's cutting-edge thermal and night vision monoculars. Built for hunters, tactical pros, and outdoor enthusiasts who demand clarity and reliability in any environment. Discover the performance and durability trusted by hunters and professionals worldwide. Gear up now at Armasight.com. Stop looking, start seeing. How'd it do, Roy?
I know, it never ceases to amaze me that not only do I get my computer to cooperate, but that you don't mind having me on.
Oh,
so
we love having you, and so does the audience. So, and today is a topic that is tailor-made, I think, for us. And I will say it's a follow-on from last week. We had Daryl Bulkey on. He talked about old school revolver training. And as Roy and I were talking before we got started, it doesn't seem to me to be old school. It was just something we did as baby cops. And it was just something, like I said, we did. But we had a reader question or a viewer question that said, what was it like, being a cop in the 80s? And that really got me thinking. And we had a great conversation. And Daryl talked about that and some things I hadn't thought of. So anyway, when we were talking about a topic for today, I was thinking generation gap, because for the first time in my life, I kind of barely remember the 60s. And I remember the culture wars, generation gaps, that's what it was called then. But we're back in that position now. It seems like, there's maybe the younger side of society, the older side of society, there's liberals and conservatives, and everybody's arguing and fighting. And that, fortunately, I don't think really affects the shooting side of things, but there is definitely differences in the way people approach the whole idea of shooting. So I said, Roy, let's talk about that. Because again, I don't think there was anything different. It's just been a continual progression over my lifetime. But yeah, things are different now versus then. So we're not saying the new way, the new shooters are bad. It's just they kind of approach things different than what we do. So your thoughts on this great generation gap, culture war, changing times, whatever we want to call it.
Well, I was a cop in the early 70s. I was a reserve until I got hired in 1978 on San Diego. And but something that I think always struck me is that our parents, the greatest generation, right? Some World War II vets and into Korea and whatnot. And then really the only sort of young group they had to deal with were we boomers. For some reason, the generations weren't broken down into microscopic subsects like they are today, And I think, we were very much like our parents. Their world was analog. Our world was analog. They worked hard. We worked hard. They drove cars with stick shifts and, non-electronic ignition. That's exactly what we did. We went to the same high schools they probably went to. And so we kind of got along all right, And then I think as time passed, for some reason now today we have these little, I don't know what you call them, but these little micro generations. Z
yeah.
and X, and I've lost all track of them,
Exactly.
And I'm not sure why that is, because it's the old, there isn't black or white, there's gray. Well, really, I think all these generations, it's really just a gray, it doesn't abruptly stop here and start there. It's crossover entirely. And I think I think shooting is the same way. And, if people say, oh, well, I'm of the AR-15 generation, it's like, well, no, actually, you just happen to stumble into that phase of this transitionary period.
Yeah.
But I think it's a sound idea that we discussed what was it like in the old kind of revolver days. But I equate that because I know people now, I see it in comments sometimes. I'll do a video on a single shot rifle, or I'll do a video on a revolver. And almost always it's like, gosh, that was neat. Thank you. I love single shot rifles. A lot of younger people are saying, wow, I didn't even know these things existed. Thanks for showing it to me. I need to learn more about it, which is all great stuff. That's all very positive and how it should be. But every once in a while you get some knucklehead who goes, 6 shots. Why the hell would you want that? I've got an AR-15 with a 48 round magazine. Why would you limit yourself with that? And it's like, well, actually though, but you really don't get it because, you were talking about, you have to walk before you run. And, I'm an advocate, and you are too, I know, is you give a young kid a single shot 22, you don't give them a 10-22.
Yeah.
Because if you give them a 10-22, all they do is make empty brass.
Yep.
If you give them a single shot 22, now they learn how to aim the gun, learn how to conserve ammunition, learn all these important things. And I think that the most modern, edgy, 18-year-old gamer, tatted up dude today should buy a revolver and learn how to shoot it.
I know a couple of viewers just went, oh, no.
Yeah. It's like, oh, he's talking about me.
Yeah. Well, Daryl made a couple of good points, and there's one I want to go back to, so remind me in a moment. But if I had to boil all this down to how is it so different today, especially among the younger / newer shooters versus the old, my observation is that nowadays there's no appreciation for the old school. And I'm not making a value judgment. I'm just saying, I think as a society, we've gotten away from looking back and that old thing of, learning history so you don't repeat it. I think there's been a break for many different reasons. But I remember when I was growing up, not only Skeeter Skelton and I read Moss Ayub and John Taffin and those guys, but we also, I was always thrilled to read about John Moses Browning and Colonel Askins and that kind of stuff. And I feel, whether I'm right or not, that the generations today don't have that same appreciation for the old stuff. Do you see that?
Oh, absolutely. They just see, oh, that's old.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an old car. Why would you want that? Right. But I like to do woodworking, for instance. And I learned to woodwork by learning to use hand tools because I couldn't afford big fancy table saws and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And if you think back, I look at Japanese handcrafted furniture from the, 17th and 16th century and stuff. These were guys that used hand saws and planes and stuff like that. And it's absolutely stunning, And so the fact that you can do it with that stuff, I think that's the foundation that today is built on. When I cut a piece of wood with my table saw, in my mind, I'm actually cutting it with a handsaw. I'm just able to do it more precisely now. And I think if someone grounds themselves with revolvers, then that allows them then to better take advantage of the new technology. I mean, if you learn to fly a stick and rudder with a tail dragger, Piper Cub, well, when you transition to a high wing Cessna and then you go on to other things, I don't know a single pilot who doesn't say, that initial flying is what gave me the experience in grounding. I still put that information to use today.
Exactly. The fundamentals. Experience. And Daryl pointed that out. I said, since I've started carrying a J-frame religiously, it's my carry gun 90+% of the time now. I said, I made the analogy, it's just like riding my motorcycle. I'm a new motorcyclist with just 2 years under my belt, but it's made me a better driver, even though I was blessed to have a lot of professional driving or training. Plus, I drove every day for 30 years. But getting back on the motorcycle reminded me of the fundamentals, and Daryl said exactly. He keeps a revolver by his chair empty, and he does dry practice while he's watching TV. And he said, if you can manipulate that 14-pound double action, a 4 or 5 pound 1911, or your striker fired 9, it's much easier. So it's just reinforcing those fundamentals. But again, as a society, we've gotten away from having the fundamentals, practicing the fundamentals. Let's just buy something, and that will make us great at what we do.
Well, if it's like wearing ankle weights. I've used this analogy before. If you learn to fight and manipulate and hone your gun handling skills with a revolver, well, then now when you take those ankle weights off and you transition to a medium frame 9 or something, I promise you will put everything that you learned there to use.
Yeah.
And you'll run faster and jump higher, and and it's really true. I think the thing to do with revolvers, and especially in the old days, because when I had a 6-shot revolver and 2 6-round speed loaders, so I had 18 total rounds when I was a policeman in the early days, I never once felt underarmed. And people may say, oh, well, you didn't have the kind of bad guys you had today. Well, but actually, we had people that had Garands, and, when I was on the police department, we were carrying revolvers. We had 2 officers killed by some guy shooting a Garand at them.
Yeah.
Having a semi-auto wouldn't have saved them in that situation. But, we still had people with pump-action shotguns and, early AK-47 bringbacks from Vietnam and stuff. Those guns were all out there. But for some reason, we never felt underarmed. I certainly never did. But I think it was because we trained to use the tool that we had. Mm-hmm. And so I was always interested. I did a study one time when I was editor of Police Magazine, because I wondered why in the old days of revolver shooting, the average was like 2.5 rounds per shooting, give or take a little bit. And then as we transitioned to semi-autos, it jumped to 5 and then 9. And now I think it's like 14 is the average police shooting, And I was curious to know of the why. Because if we could do it with 2 or 3 rounds before, why can we not do it now? And so I sent a survey out to the readers, and I had a lot of responses. And so one of the questions was, why do you only shoot 2 or 3 rounds? And the overwhelming response, what people said, well, I don't want to be out of ammunition because then I wouldn't be able to protect my partner.
Oh, wow.
And so, that was, well, you remember, it was shoot 2 or 3 times, stop, kind of look and see where you are, right?
Yep.
Because you had a limited amount of ammunition. Yep. You certainly didn't want to reload unless you absolutely were driven to it.
Yeah.
And, but then that changed when we lost track of that conservative attention to detail, attention to accuracy, and we started relying on technology to solve our problem rather than training.
Yep.
And so I think if a modern shooter, don't look at revolvers at what they can't do. Look at revolvers with what they can do.
Yeah.
You know?
And something else we identified, Daryl and I in the previous podcast, is the infatuation with tacticool. And again, there's a lot of reasons for that. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because when I was a young guy, I was infatuated with tacticool, but it was, I think you would agree, Roy, it was a lot different. And when we were examining that, I said, when I came on the department, my first captain was a Silver Star winner in Nam. Some guys, especially the recent retirees, they'd been in Korea. A lot of these guys had seen hardcore bad combat, but there wasn't this focus on that kind of stuff. They kind of put that as that's what they did there, and this is what they do here. They were certainly hard. They were tested by combat, but it was just so much different. And Daryl made an observation, I'll paraphrase. There's a lot of cops today that can tell you the entire loadout of SEAL Team 6, but they can't really tell you about case law. And that's kind of that idea that, and I suppose maybe some of it's gaming. You get all this gear you're given if you've got enough merits or dollars or whatever. So you're shooting stuff that we would have maybe heard of once in an obscure magazine piece. And now guys can literally use it every day for hours on end. So again, it's understandable and times change, but would you agree with that there just wasn't that focus on tacticool and having all the tactical stuff and tactical techniques and tactical, over and over and over?
I agree. Part of it is that it wasn't available.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of it wasn't available. There was always that guy, though, the Captain Gadget.
Wait, we've probably both been accused of that at some point in our earlier lives, if I had to guess.
If you're just out of the academy for the first 6 months, you're an idiot.
Yes.
And you'll buy anything that you
and
see
everything
that has anything to do with being a policeman. And what you end up with is a lot of stuff you don't ever use again.
Tactical keychains. Tactical keychains.
Everything. It was just silliness. I think more police officers in those days were geared toward, if this piece of equipment is more effective, it helps me do my job better. It helps keep me safer. It helps me see farther, hear better, know the law better, because I don't know if you had them. Probably we had these little pocket guides. And so it was like pocket guides to accident scene investigation and pocket guides to burglary investigation and stuff. I always had some in my pocket. And, but it seems to me, I'll speak for myself and my sort of circle of friends, when we would see something and we would look and groan and just say, well, that's just nothing but a waste of time. But then you would see cops with whatever it was.
Yeah.
I know when I actually owned the very first Streamlight SL20 in 1975, probably. Yeah. That was on the West Coast. It was a sample that was at Triple E Police Equipment Company in San Diego. They had a sample, and it wasn't even out for production for quite a while, and so I had to have it. So this was the first never before seen, super flashlight. At the time, we only had mag lights. You remember those?
Oh, yeah.
And then eventually you could get like a xenon bulb or something, and then it was like you could almost see halfway up down a block then, which was awe-inspiring to all of us, right? And, mine, though, I remember we were doing a beginning of a canyon search, and they're shining their lights down trying to see down this canyon. I walked up, and I turned my Streamlight on. It, lit up this canyon, right? Yeah. And it was that moment, that very second, where before I was, Captain Inspector Gadget, who, you spent $100 on a flashlight? Because otherwise mag lights were like, I don't know, $12 or something. And, but when they saw that, they realized that, well, no, actually, this is an effective tool, and we can be safer and do our job better, and it's not just a gadget,
Yeah.
And then they started to appear on the police department. But revolvers are that way, and I think it helps to keep you grounded. If you learn to fight with the basics, then, gosh, when you have better tools, you'll just do better.
Yeah.
And
I think another good indicator of this situation is there were AR-15s when we were, or M16s, whatever designation, when we were coming up, but virtually nobody carried them except maybe SWAT. We all were issued your standard 870, sometimes a Mossberg 500. And, I've said till I'm blue in the face, and I think sometimes people look at me, boomer, but shotguns never went away. They were used in the Old West. They were used in the 20s and 30s. They're still used today, and they're still an effective weapon. They're just not popular, and they have their shortcomings too. I'm not saying they're the gold standard, but they're pretty darn good, except you can't really get anybody interested in them because everybody's got to have a black rifle. And again, nothing wrong with a black rifle. I got a whole bunch of them in the closet, okay? But it's just that whole infatuation with new and cool. And another side symptom of the black rifle infatuation is some of these guns you've seen, Roy, and we've talked about it, is how much crap are you hanging off of there? And when you see guys that have like an IR designator, well, do you own NVG? No. Well, do you anticipate like Spooky coming over and laying down fire? No. Well, why do you have an IR designator? Well, it's pretty cool, and a guy made me a good deal, and it's like, Okay, kids, can you shoot the damn thing? Does it work every time you shoot it? So again, I'm not harshing on ARs. I'm not promoting shotguns as the better thing, but it seems a little interesting to me in this discussion that we have pushed shotguns completely over here in the corner. And I've said it before, what's under my bed is an 870.
Well, I think it's fashionable. And for those people who are swayed by fashion, if you buy designer jeans that change every year, if you're a man or a woman, I don't care. If you're a man, you have to go hide in a closet, okay? But anyway, if
man card,
if you're affected by what's fashionable, by what influencers are doing on YouTube, and so then you have to go buy that, I think you're making a mistake. I mean, you can do it if you want to. It's your money. Have fun, live your life, right?
Yeah.
But if you're really interested in doing what's the best, then don't be fashionable. Be critical.
Yeah.
And do I need an IR designator? Well, no. I had an AR-15 in 1975.
Oh, wow.
I paid the royal sum of $285 for it, which was a huge amount of money in those days. Because I bought a Smith & Wesson Model 29 for $179. That'll tell you about this.
Yeah.
And I shot it a little bit, and I didn't really like it. It was loud. It was pokey. If you tried to carry it, seemed like something was always poking you somewhere. I thought the manual of arms for it was a little bit awkward. Do this and push the wrong button, the top falls open, and I thought, man, I don't understand if I was in battle, that'd be fine, but I wasn't in battle, and I didn't carry it on duty, so it was just for fun, but I wanted to learn about it. And I think today, if people don't have that experience with what is basic and what works, then if they start there at this super fancy optics laser 40 round AR-15, I think they just assume that that's what you have to have.
Yeah.
And I think you do yourself a disservice. I've got a Winchester model 1907. So it's a semi-automatic rifle. It was really the first centerfire semi-automatic rifle for Winchester. It was 1907. And mine is in 351, which is a 180 grain bullet at almost 2,000 feet per second, right? So call it a 30-30 kind of, right? Except it's a semi-auto rifle with a detachable magazine. And it's trim, it has fixed iron sights. It's a little on the heavy side because it's recoil operated, right?
Yeah.
And I can step outside my back door here and I could hit a steel torso plate at 80 yards every single shot, almost as fast as I can pull the trigger, right? And so my contention is, if you know how to fight with something like that, then when you're given something that has optics or a better trigger or more magazine capacity, then you will know how to take advantage of those things, right?
Exactly.
Because you've been grounded in these basics. And I'll tell you right now, too, is even when I have transitioned to high capacity, or I'm sorry, what do they call it? Standard capacity magazines. Magazines and autoloaders. I still tend to default to be conservative.
Right.
Because I know that 2.5 shots works. And so think about the tactics involved, because I think a reader told me one time, it was really funny. He wrote a letter. He said, I always thought tactical was something you did, not something you bought.
That's perfect.
And it's perfect, So that's why when people say, oh, this is a tactical flashlight or a tactical... Yeah. I saw one the other day. It was for women's leggings, those stretchy pants.
Don't tell me.
I love dearly, right? But these are tactical leggings for, and so they've got like magazine pockets and stuff like that. And I thought... I don't know, call them something, call them effective, call them, useful. useful with ancillary pockets or something
Yeah.
to be used tactically, right? So,
Yeah.
but I don't know if we're getting off track or not, but I think I know a lot of young people will disagree. They'll say they will immediately look at the shortcomings of a revolver, because that's what we're talking about, and rather than understand that it's just the baseline of anything, So if you learn the fundamentals, I think it was Clint Smith used to say advanced tactics are just fundamentals applied.
Yeah.
So if you don't have those, then you have nothing to apply. So it's often said that if something happens and you have to go to guns, you will revert to your training, which you and I both know you do.
Yeah, you
right?
do.
You automatically assume the stance. You automatically, suddenly your gun's in your hand. I mean, it's just, you don't even think about it. It happens automatically. But the problem is if you don't train, then when you go to guns, you'll revert to your training, but that means you'll revert to nothing.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
And so that's where I think, guys and girls, you need to find a guy that looks like me or Brent and say, would you show me about revolvers?
Yeah.
I know people poo-poo single-shot rifles. They do it all the time when I post something. And I try to educate them, and I try to say, if you learn to hunt effectively with a single-shot rifle, if you learn to manipulate a single-shot rifle, if you learn the shortcomings and if you learn, the positive sides of it, well, then now suddenly when you have a bolt action that's capable of shooting 500 yards and with 6-inch groups, well, you really can apply that better.
Exactly.
And,
going back to the generation gap aspect of this, I want to challenge, if we've got younger viewers, younger listeners, it's great. Again, I love that you love your AR-15, and you can tell me, probably more than I can tell you the loadout of Delta. Okay. That's great. Good for you. And you've played Call of Duty 10,000 times and you own a few black guns, black rifles. What I want to challenge you though is go back and read the history and find out about Eugene Stoner, who, if you didn't know, designed the AR-15 and M16 platform. And then go back from there and learn and develop your appreciation for where all this came from. I'm not saying get rid of your black rifles. Heck, you may want to buy more of them. I'm good with that. But understand how we arrived from Chinese gunpowder to that AR in your hand. And the second thing, and this is another thing that we're lacking, is get a shotgun, borrow it, have a friend take you or whatever. Go out and shoot it, and don't just shoot 3 or 4 shots and go, well, that thing kicks pretty hard. I don't like it. Spend some time, learn the positives and the negatives so you can make informed decisions. If you say, I never want to take one of those or use it for a home defense situation or whatever, okay, good on you, but you've made an informed decision rather than a decision based on maybe what an Instagram person told you. And do the same thing with revolvers and, like Roy said, single shot rifles. The M1 Garand is still the creme de la creme of fighting. The reason they quit using it was because in the conditions of Vietnam and to some extent Korea, it was too much of a rifle, but it's still, oh Lord, if I see somebody with a Garand, I'm thinking they probably know how to shoot it, and that 30-06 round is bad juju on the receiving end. So that's my challenge. Learn about it. Actually go out and try it more than just a couple of shots, and then that develops a more rounded shooter. You appreciate all the ancillary things that go along with shooting. You appreciate the Second Amendment. You can talk intelligently and make intelligent decisions, and I think when you get down to it, that's the one thing that makes Roy and I kind of crazy when we look at comments and reader mail. If you make a good point and prove that I'm wrong, or at least we have a significant difference of opinion, if you back it up with fact, okay, good for you. I'll support that all day long. It's that's stupid. Okay, why is it stupid? Based on what? Your experience, your training? If you can tell me that, great. But most of those people that make those kind of statements don't. So that's what I would challenge you is go out and do this stuff and learn about this stuff And then if you continue doing what you're doing today, great. Knock yourself out. Buy more guns. I love them. I got a whole bunch of black guns in my closet, pistols and rifles. But I also got stuff that was built before the turn of the 19th or 20th century. So I would kind of got on a soapbox there, Roy, but a rumph.
I challenge people to grow up. and what I mean is you need to get past the adolescent, wow, that's cool. Right?
Yeah.
Whoa, look at that Sarah, or
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine if you have the basics, if you understand the technology, if you know how to apply it, if you've had the training, and that kind of stuff. Then you want to have some fun guns, have a nice time. But if you're buying your first AR-15 and your purchasing is based on how cool it is, then you're an idiot. So, and it's really interesting because when you're first into this, you look at things and you go, wow, gosh, that looks interesting. I wonder how much that is. Does that work? I wonder what do you do with it? Where do you get it? Right? You reach a point, and I'll say it at my age, it was some years ago. I got to it when I was a senior policeman. It was like this. Someone would show me something. When you look at it, you instantly say, "Well, that's stupid," right? Even though they were really proud of their new fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
But we would say, "Oh, that's stupid," because we would see the shortcomings, or we would see that it has really no use, in
the real world.
In the real world, yeah. I mean, so it's like two things. It's like there's play, and then there's real.
Yeah.
And the people who don't know the difference between the two are the people that I see, and like, they'll say, "Hey, I want to show you my new guns that I have." And they're all these like really stupid looking AR-15s with explosion in a paint factory paint jobs and every kind of optic you could possibly hang on one, and 2 foregrips and, and an espresso machine, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I always say, well, that's really interesting. You pick it up, it weighs 12 pounds,
Yep.
And when I say, well, like, do you have a fighting rifle? Do what's your home defense thing? And they say, well, I got one of these.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, I hope you have fun, and I hope you never have to apply it because, yeah.
Well, and in fairness, I will close out by saying I'm not going to say who or what, but there's somebody that just wrote something, and the person is about my age, but he isn't necessarily super experienced, and he fell into the how cool is that trap. And it's a piece of gear I've used extensively in real world scenarios, and he's an idiot. And so it's not just younger shooters. It's maybe not a chronological age thing, but this guy, he didn't even know what he didn't know. And the other final point I wanted to make is the whole idea of the more I learn, and I'm blessed to be in this position, right? The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And that attitude in general in life seems to be going away. So if you want to really be a master at some of this stuff, learn and practice and try everything, and realize just because you know the loadout of Delta doesn't mean that you know everything. And I would venture to say if you're a normal functioning person, you'll realize I've still got a lot more to learn. And that's what is hard for me, that the more I do what I do, the more I realize I don't know nothing about nothing. So,
and for me, I'll build on that, is that the more I know, the more I know what I don't need.
True.
I mean, if someone said, "Hey, you can only hunt the rest of your natural life with a lever action 94, I'd say, okay.
Sure.
I think that's the thing. It's like when I go in a tool store now, I am amazed because I can go into Harbor Freight and walk the entire store, every aisle, look in every bin, and think, I don't need anything. And it's for two reasons. It's, first of all, I already have a lot of tools, right? But the second thing is you look at something, and I you get to where you can get past the, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Right. And you get right to, but do I have any use for it?
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
So,
I was trying to wrap this up, but you made a very salient point that I discovered years ago. I like to go to the big outdoor stores, the mega stores. I've driven hours to go to those mega stores. And several years ago, I was heartbroken. I told my wife, she goes, why didn't you buy anything? I said, I didn't see anything I really, truly needed.
Oh.
And that was the first time I'd ever, been to one of those stores. And there was I didn't need anything. It was fun to see. And okay, that's kind of cool, but I don't need it. And I got to tell you, it's a little depressing at times, but
I think it's freeing. I think, and that's where we'll get back to what the point is that if you're new to this or you're learning or something, is like, don't look at that loaded out AR-15 and think that's what you need.
Yeah.
If you want it, that's fine.
Sure.
That's a different thing, but you don't need it. And I think if you look at revolvers that way, is that I almost can't think of an IU files where someone would have needed more than a 5-shot J-frame, except in a few of the police shootouts, or those kind of things. But the average schmo isn't in a situation where they get in like a police-like shootout with multiple bad guys. And so in reality, if you have a 5 or 6-shot revolver or a 7-shot 32 revolver or something, you probably are just fine. And you will protect yourself just fine. And so as long as you accept that, understand that, practice, get to know how to do it and everything. Now, as you go forward and you evaluate the threats in your area, what are your expectations? How do you protect your family? That's when you can apply these basics and learn what new equipment actually makes sense for you to buy.
Yeah.
To do that, to do the job. If you want to buy something because you want it just because it's cool, that's fine. But don't think that answers the first equation, because usually it doesn't.
Exactly. Well, let us know what you think. I'm sure we'll get flamed a bit from some folks that we punctured their long cherished, assumptions. But let us know what you think. And whether you're an old guy, a boomer, or you're, an 18-year-old Call of Duty guy. Let us know what you think about this. So you can leave comments below if you're watching us on YouTube. And if you're listening to the podcast on one of the many podcast platforms that we're on, you can hit me up, editor@gunsmagazine.com, and I can send stuff along to Roy. So we want to hear what you think. So, Roy, us old guys, it's time for us to go to Golden Corral and then have our nap. So we're gonna wrap this thing up, and it's been a fun discussion. So appreciate you coming on.
You bet. Thanks a lot. I think it'll be interesting to see the comments.
It's always great talking to Roy Huntington, and I would say in this particular topic, we are prime examples of old guys. So I think this was a good topic to discuss, and I'm interested to hear what you think, whether you've been shooting 50 or 60 years, or you've been shooting 50 or 60 days. Leave us a comment down below and let us know what you think of our discussion. Before we go, a couple of housekeeping notes. Of course, you know what I'm going to say next. Please like and subscribe. If you're the one person in America who hasn't yet liked and subscribed the podcast, please do that. That's how we keep bringing you these great free podcasts. Also, make sure you check out our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com and AmericanCop.com. Of course, American Cop's not just for law enforcement, it's for folks who want to be prepared when things get sideways. Also, there's that little thing called Guns Magazine. You can check out our website at gunsmagazine.com. If you're looking to buy a subscription to our magazines or any of our special publications, such as John Connor's Odd Angry Shot or Roy Huntington's Insider, don't forget you can check out fmgpubs.com. And finally, our sponsor, Armasight. Step up your game with Armasight's cutting-edge thermal and night vision monoculars. Stop looking, start seeing. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of everybody that works so hard here at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you yet again, now get out there and get shooting.